Tips from Trestle is brought to you by Wiseox AI, Advantage Trust GPO, the Dining with Dementia Workshop, and the 100% Leader. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Welcome back into another episode of Tips from Trestle. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and today we're pulling one out of the archives. As you know, I like to share some of the really great conversations that I have on my Cocktails and Conversations monthly webinar. And this was one that I've had for a little while, just been waiting for the right time to share it. And so this felt like the time, and so I brought it out of the files. So we're talking today with a good friend of ours, Joseph Cope. Joseph is known as the empathy guy. And his role, what he does with his business, is he truly tries to dismantle the belief that empathy is a soft skill. It really, truly is a skill that is invaluable to leadership. It's a qualitative task, and it's something that can really elevate your business and your operation as a whole. So I got him to come and talk about empathy, about how to use it in your business and how to really make it an impactful part of your leadership strategy. So let's dive into my conversation with Joseph Cope. Now, Joseph, let's start with the misconception around empathy, right? You've done this for a couple of decades now, teaching, coaching, implementing empathy practices. You worked with, you call them this, the world's most misunderstood population, teenagers. And now you're working with corporate leaders about empathy and making sure they understand it's a fierce skill and not a soft one. So with that kind of background, what's the biggest misconception about empathy that's keeping leaders stuck in this kind of outdated mode?
Well, Aaron, firstly, in all seriousness, thank you for having me on. And let's start with this. I think one of the most commonly used misnomers in America, corporate America, organizational places is this concept of a soft skill. And in this day and age, we've talked about it since the blow up of technology, right? Early 2000s, here comes the internet, and the world's going to end because the kids can't think anymore. Then comes Google, then comes the cell phone explosion, and now here we are in the AI place. We are discovering more and more that human connection is going to be the currency of the future. And so when human connection is what we crave, and we're starting to feel what inauthentic connection really feels like these days, it's becoming more and more apparent that what used to be considered a soft skill is now going to become leverage within organizations that retain top talent. Because people want to be in a place where they feel valued, they feel welcomed, they feel accepted, they feel like their voice is bringing something to the table. And just to throw empathy in as one of those quote soft skills is a travesty, in my opinion. Of course, I'm looking at the lens through this, but the misnomer commonly comes from this: empathy and sympathy get thrown into the same basket all the time. And so I would just even ask the audience folks who are out there, just think in your head, what would you say is the difference between empathy and sympathy? Just take the time to ask yourself, what's the difference between empathy and sympathy? And when you ask that question, sometimes we just think empathy or sympathy, I feel bad for somebody. Empathy, I can take their perspective. And that's not bad. But to me, that's a 1990s definition. And it worked in the 90s and the early 2000s. I'd like to redefine empathy as this: empathy is the skill that a leader possesses to create space for another human so that individual can see the value of change for themselves. That's empathy. The skill of being able to step into a space with authenticity to create space for another human to see the value of change for themselves. Because we're struggling in our organizations. We're struggling with apathy. We're struggling with burnout. We're struggling with retention. We're struggling with all those buzzwords like that we're seeing in all the places. But what's the main reason when you ask people why they didn't stay? They didn't understand me. I didn't fit in. It wasn't my place to be. And all of those pieces can be solved if leaders had the capacity and the skill to create that space for the humans in their organizations.
Yeah. So invaluable. Such a great way to look at how to connect with the person in a, not, I would say unique way, but in the right way to think about the whole person when you approach that. So here's the thing I also think happens is when you start talking to like corporate leaders about all of this, they start thinking, okay, what's the value of doing this? What's the value of change for this? How do I measure this? So it's that ROI reality check. So when you hear leaders push back on, well, how do I measure empathy? That's such a woo woo thing to say. Like, how do I do that? So, what do you tell them when they say, show me the numbers when it comes to
Mm.
empathy and its impact on their organization?
Let me answer this by asking a question for some of us who are in health or who have experience in healthcare. Or let's just call it self health care, taking care of our bodies. There's a quick fix with the pill, right? And then there's eating your veggies. And then there's eating your veggies and doing the and getting your exercise. I could give you hard numbers about culture, but to speak to somebody who needs ROI, the question I would ask is, what was your retention rate last year? And what was the survey? How did the survey with company culture come back last year? Are you interested in increasing those percentages and decreasing them there where they need to be decreased? Are you interested in raising the retention rate and raising your hiring rate with quality people? And are you interested in decreasing the low morale, increasing the morale at your company? Because if we're doing those pulse checks, the morale checks, the call it whatever you want in different organizations, those are coming back consistently lower and lower as time is going on. And if that is a measure of the temperature of the company and you're looking to get the best people where you are, don't you want to create a culture where people want to be where you are?
That's such a great way to, that's already something they're tracking. It's something they're already looking at, but they don't necessarily understand why those numbers are important or how they can impact those numbers. You know, a lot, I saw somebody talking on one of my social media feeds about retention and about it was in a podcast from, I believe it was Erin Thompson, Aspire for More, her podcast this week. And they were talking about these programs that people put in place for retention and how like having like a loyalty program and all those things are so important. But that's just kind of like window dressing when it comes to like retention. And so as you talk to leaders about this, you've mentioned self empathy and kind of looking at yourself and self health a little bit. You really emphasize that has to happen first before, as a leader, you can effectively use empathy in your organization with your team. And so, walk us through how you look at that practically, and then maybe how like that tough and rumble, like how heavy-handed leader would be able to push through doing this better with themselves and with their organization.
I'm so glad you brought up the self empathy piece, Aaron, because This is a skill. And empathy doesn't just come because I want to connect with someone. Let me frame it like this. There are studies that have shown that authenticity from a human to a human resonates at the deepest levels from human to human. There is something about authenticity that can't be measured, it can only be felt. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There's something like, that there's people that you've talked to and they're saying the right words, but it's just not there. So this concept of self-empathy is, if you think about the definition that I gave earlier, empathy is the skill a leader possesses to create space for another human so that individual can see the value of change for themselves. Let's flip that. Let's flip the mirror and take that in ourselves. Self empathy is the skill a human possesses to create space for themselves so they can see the value of change for themselves. Because if we are not whole, Aaron, you mentioned this term, coming from the whole place to take care of the whole person. If we are not whole and do not take care of love, and I'm going to use a trite saying, we say it all the time, but it fits. If we don't take care of filling our cup, there's nothing to pour out from. And so the concept of self-empathy, it's not just self-care. It's the intention of creating space for myself so that my cup is filled, so that when I go into these challenging moments, when I step into a situation that's emotionally, potentially exhausting, I have the capacity because I've created space for myself. And before I kick it back to Aaron, I want to mention this one thing. It's skill related, right? Behavioral gurus out there will tell you, if it is something that you want to change, if it's a habit that you want to build, if it's a skill that you want to grow, it takes at least 30 reps before you can even have a chance at doing it without thinking about it.
Yeah.
30 times. So 30 times with intention. So that means self-care 30 times. So when you go into these challenging moments and you feel, gosh, like, how is this empathy thing going to happen? You have to ask yourself, have I been able to give myself the time 30 times with intention to create the space for myself to even consider that?
Why do you think it's so difficult for some leaders to do that inward check? Like good leaders have checklists and understand how to like manage teams and be able to put processes and systems in place. I know this is something sometimes I struggle with is that internal check, right? Is my check engine light on personally versus me being prepared to take care of my team? Why is that such a struggle for individuals?
So all human beings, Aaron, are born with what I call an empathic nature. So you're born with an empathic nature because human beings are wired to connect. Those of us, most humans who grew up in a healthy or relatively healthy home that's full of love, are going to have what's called an overdeveloped empathic nature. And when you have an overdeveloped empathic nature, you feel what's going on with somebody else. People who are on the high end of the overdeveloped empathic nature spectrum are what you call your typical empaths. Okay. If you spend so much time implementing your empathic nature as your go-to strategy in challenging moments, you end up giving what's called sympathy and not empathy. And when you pour out sympathy because you don't know that you're pouring out sympathy, you're draining from a cup that already doesn't have anything. And when you feel burnt out, walls go up. When you feel burnt out, you go into your shell. When you feel burnt out, you leave, and one of those F's hits, fight, flight, or freeze, kicks in because you've had enough. You just can't take it anymore. So the intention with which leaders can use to create that space goes so far into the, I don't feel great right now. What can I do with intention not just to have a glass of wine, not just to binge watch on Netflix, but things like, I mean, simple things like get some fresh air for the next 5 minutes, soak up some vitamin D. I mean, as simple as drinking a glass of water. I mean, Aaron, this is silly, but yesterday I had to go down to an event, an HR event, and on the way down, I just felt low energy, and I stopped at my local grocery store and I was looking down the aisles and I was like, I could do like an energy drink. I could get another cup of coffee, but I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. I gotta be up at 4 in the morning. You know what I did? I got a pre-tossed kale salad. I was the one. I literally had this thought in mind. I'm eating a kale salad to get energy to take care of myself. But it was incredible. It was like whatever it was. I'm not a huge nutrition nut, but
Right.
just that consideration of doing what I needed to do to create space within myself, even if it was in the health space. It was just knowing that I did that to create space, knowing that I need to be at my best in that event that was coming up last night.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I have started doing a thing here at my own house, which when I'm in the office and I'm working, I need a break. I will get up and I buy the little miniature cucumbers. And like, I'll take 5 minutes, I'll have a cucumber, I'll kind of walk around and like just breathe. And what you're saying makes so much sense, right? Because at this point, it's almost not even a thought because I've done it so much over the last couple of months that it's like, okay, I need a break. I get up and I do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to sit back down and tackle the next thing on my list. So that makes so much sense to like stop and figure out how can I refill my cup, as you put it, a little
Mhm.
bit to be able to be available and accessible to those we support.
Listen, I'm going to give you another secret. So those of you who are out there, just show of hands, how many of you in the last week have felt some sort of stress or anxiety around work? Show of hands. Like if you don't have your hand up, you're lying at some point. So let me tell you a secret that I discovered. Brain science, okay, neurobiology has discovered that the part of your brain that activates when stress hits gets turned off when you actively engage in something creative.
Mm.
Now, I don't care what the creative is. Literally, the creative, Aaron, could be when I feel stressed, I'm going to go outside and get some sunshine. It could be something as simple as coloring for 5 minutes. I've even heard some people have used this hack when they start to feel anxious and stressed out. They try to creatively do their signature with their left hand just to get their brain. It's something to just get your mind in the space of, I need to actually create something. Some of us in here might do something, create something on Canva. You might actually go on your social media. You might create something quick, whatever it is. But the antidote to stress and anxiety is to quickly kick in something with creativity. So if we're talking creating space and you're in a challenging moment, you might push the pause on the conversation and say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm my best self. Can I come back to this in about 10 minutes? And in those 10 minutes, yeah, you can deep breathe. Great. But what are you going to do that's going to reactivate your brain, turn that amygdala piece off so
Yeah.
that it's not highly activated, and give yourself a chance to create space for yourself so you can create space for somebody else?
So great, and as somebody who always still in my extended career still struggle with that, it's so important to hear that. Well, this is something you talk about it when you're talking to organizations or when you're working with those companies I mentioned, because it's important. We have to bridge the human connection piece that we've been talking about with bottom line accountability, right? Because at the end of the day, this whole point is that empathy is not a soft skill. It's a fierce skill. It's a business skill. Because it seems like it's such a weird balance to try and figure out. Can you share an example or two of how a leader, maybe one that you worked with or one that you've seen, was able to hold someone accountable while still creating that empathetic space that we're talking about?
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to use somebody who didn't even know he was doing it and did it with me. See, when I moved from the state of California to the state of Texas in 2015, the state of Texas is the father state of standardized testing. Say what you wish. I'm a former educator. I have my own opinions on standardized testing. And when I moved from California to Texas, obviously very different approaches, right? So when I got to Texas, I looked at myself in the mirror and was like, gosh, this standardized testing is killing us. Like it's killing creativity. And I was so anti. Okay. Then I got placed in a school where our test scores were so below par that we were on year 9 of what's called program improvement. You're supposed to shut the school down at year 5.
Wow.
But Aaron, we were the only middle school on the other side of town. And I'm just going to let that sit. Think about the population.
Yeah.
Think about the struggles. Think about the value of education or the lack thereof. And so I got told when I was interviewed, Joseph, just build relationships with these kids and they'll grow. And so I did. And I established relationships. But you know what I didn't like doing, Aaron? I hated writing lesson plans because lesson plans to me were like the way that I'm giving into the system. You know, like I got prep for this state test. I hate that stupid state test. I'm not going to create those stupid lesson plans. And so here's what happened. My assistant principal, he came in and he just started observing my lessons. So I wasn't creating lesson plans, but rather than coming hard handed down on me and saying, Joseph, where's your lesson plans? It's 8 o'clock on Monday morning. I need those. He just started observing how I was teaching. And you could tell he'd walk in, he'd take a couple of notes, and then he'd leave me a note that said, hey, I love the intention that you're putting in it. You really hit this. And he'd talk about a standard. He'd drop, hey, you really taught this standard well. And he hit that in there. So he does this for like a month, Aaron. He just does it for a month. Then he calls me into his office and he goes, look, Joseph, I know you hate writing lesson plans. I get it. I just need to let you know the instruction that is going on in your class is through the roof. You got kids eating out of the palm of your hand. But if I'm going to be able to give you feedback on your instruction, I have to know where you are in the lesson plan. So when you create lesson plans, I don't care what they look like. Don't make it check boxes. Don't do that grid. If you need to do stream of consciousness, do your stream of consciousness. Just make sure that when I walk in, I know kind of where you're going to be so that I can just go down the list. And then he said this, he said, Aaron, he said, I can't give feedback on nothing. And that hit me. Did you notice? He didn't say standardized testing one time. He didn't say state blah, blah, blah. He spoke to me in a currency that had value to me. And he did it because he earned my trust. He could have come in and said, where's your lesson plan? But he spent the time to get curious. He spent the time to see what I was bringing that was of value. He was also thinking about how I could improve as a teacher. And he pulled it all together and it was masterful. And guess what? I'm loyal to him to a fault,
Yeah.
to a fault.
I love that example because as you're going through it, I'm literally sitting here thinking about a culinary director and a cook, or a wellness director and a CNA, and how they could be having a very similar conversation around the rules and regulations around care or food safety or recipes or care planning, whatever it might be, and using that exact same approach of, look, we have to do these things. And by the way, you do them well. I just need you to document it or understand why we're following this regulation or rule and put that in there. And not talking about the rules and regulations, I think could free up a lot of our staff to really buy in better about what we're trying to do.
You know, one of the challenges with the word accountability, Aaron, one of the challenges is accountability has become synonymous with rules.
Yeah.
And we're all smart people in here. Rules are made to be broken.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we come in with that heavy handed accountability at the beginning, you've already activated the part of the brain that is responsible for survival just because you came in with a heavy-handed accountability and now you've got a mountain to climb. What if you could come in, even though you needed accountability? What if you came in and your accountability was firstly to yourself to become the mirror? And then secondly, your accountability was to determine what is the currency that I need to spend in so it has value to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm. As we kind of wrap up this part of the conversation, Joseph, you have this me first movement that you talk about in your presentations. How do you approach those individuals to help them see empathy is not a weakness, but it can be a leadership superpower?
Yeah. Let's define why it's called the me first movement, because you know this, when adults are emotionally dysregulated, what do they act like? Kids. And who do kids think about? Themselves.
Yeah.
We we when we get emotionally dysregulated, we go into survival mode. And when we go into survival mode, we think about one person, and that's ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we talk about how can we break that cycle of the me first movement, it's going to take leaders who are courageous enough to grow the skill for themselves first so that they can create space. I can't stress enough. This is not a one and done. And I would even tell you this is not like on the 31st time that you try, you can say, I got it,
Yeah.
right? Like this is something that I've been doing for decades and decades and decades. And now I have a 16-year-old and I have a 13-year-old at home. And there are times where I'm banging my head against the wall going, "Oh, gosh, I wish these were my students, not my children."
Right.
So it is a lifelong journey of how to create space, because the reality is every human is unique. Every human is unique. It's just the responsibility of the leaders to become the mirror themselves by looking in the mirror first.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I feel like that's a pretty big piece or maybe it might not be appropriate for when you're trying to lead with empathy. Sometimes I feel like vulnerability on the leader side can help set a safe space. I don't know if that's the right word, but can you talk a little bit about vulnerability and where that plays into your messaging?
Oh, so good, Nancy. So vulnerability, one, I love Brene Brown and her work on vulnerability. It's game changing, game changing. But what I would say is this: those of us who have an overdeveloped empathic nature may begin to rely on vulnerability as a means of connection without doing the self work first. Just sit in that for a second and think about it. Because the question that you asked is, where does vulnerability come into play? The next level that you have to ask is, why am I being vulnerable with this person? Am I being vulnerable to create space for them? Or am I being vulnerable to see if I can get their sympathy for me? It's a hard question to ask. Those of us who are, listen, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to venture against everyone who's on this call, because of the industry that we're in. We're heart centered people. So we drive from the heart. We care about humans. The hard piece of caring about humans is that we go deep really fast, and we think that others are on the same wavelength as we are, and not everybody is. So I'm going to give you a word. It's a B word, Nancy. It's not a 5-letter word. It's another word. Don't be a 5-letter B, but be a leader who has boundaries with your vulnerability. That boundaries word is going to be the biggest growth point for those of us who have big hearts, who care for people. And those boundaries will come when you start to create the space for yourself.
So, Joseph, just really quickly, let everybody know how they can find you, connect with you, maybe have you come to one of these conferences that these fine groups host and be a speaker and presenter?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am very active on LinkedIn. If you have not already, if you look up the Empathy Guy, I am there. Connect with me. My website is empathyguy.com, and I'm available and around. So I speak around the country. I also still get to do work in the education space. So my garden, my petri dish still is working with teachers, working with students. And what we're doing now is we're finding pockets of humanity within corporate America, within organizations that are out there that are just looking in how to handle these challenging behaviors in the workplace. What are the real skills that our leaders, mid-level managers need to get there? And so if that's something that resonates, if that's something that you feel like would be something for your audience, I'm here. I'm excited to bring it out. And as you can tell, this is a very different take on empathy than what you've heard before.
So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. Have a great evening. So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.